Welcome to Constellations, the podcast from Kratos, where industry leaders share their thoughts and experience on the future of space business, policy, and opportunity. If you like Constellations, please support us by giving a rating and review on iTunes. And don't forget to share this podcast online to help our community grow.
Welcome to Constellations, the podcast from Kratos. My name is John Gilroy, and I will be your moderator. According to a recent Bloomberg Intelligence report, the world is poised to see an explosion of growth in the generative AI sector over the next 10 years that promises to fundamentally change the way technology sector operates. To learn more about the potential of this transformational technology for the space industry, we have with us Buffy Wajvoda, AWS Global Leader for Aerospace and Satellite Solutions Architecture. She will provide her perspective on the opportunities, risks, and future of the technology for the space industry. Buffy is an experienced leader with a demonstrated history of working in public cloud and big data in a range of industries from aerospace and satellite to U.S. government. So, Buffy, we're going to jump right in here. So put on your seatbelt. Generative AI has been around since the 1960s. It's nothing new, really. So what has taken the technology to the mainstream today?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say there's actually three compelling reasons to why Gen AI is being seen more as mainstream. First off is tech. It's always tech, right? So we have advancements in compute, we have advancements in data storage, and we have advancements in new machine learning algorithms. In the past, if you wanted to do something like a large foundational model, you would probably need a data center of computers in order to produce that model. Cloud fixes that with pay-as-you-go compute and storage. So tech has been a huge part of this. In addition, we now have AI/ML algorithms that specifically focus on creation or generation. So these new models are really poised to do that sort of generative AI/ML. The second compelling reason that I think Gen AI is more mainstream is just the accessibility to large foundational models. I think we've all played with some of the large language models that are out there, where these foundational models have taken a opus of literature all the way up to 2021 in most cases, and allows you to interact with all of this data in sort of a natural way, saying things like, where can I go see this? Or who was president at this time? All without actually understanding or knowing the innards of AI/ML. And then the third compelling reason is just media and culture. And that kind of speaks back to the other one, but there has just been so much excitement and so much focus on generative AI/ML that I think it's just naturally becoming more and more compelling for customers and individuals.
Last week, I sat down with a guy named David Linthicum. He just came up with this book, and he says something kind of interesting. He said that, AI and ML are concerns with new life thanks to cloud architecture. It seems like that's hitting on it's always been there. All of a sudden, now you finally have the horsepower to move the plow through the field or something, That's great.
100%.
Yeah. People may be more familiar with traditional concept of AI. So how is generative AI different?
Yeah, first, let's actually talk about the definition of AI/ML just to, set some framework. So AI/ML is the use of machines or algorithms to produce intelligence for problems that were either cost prohibitive or resource prohibitive, usually because of the size of data, the complexity of the algorithm, or both. For example, let's take weather predictions. Weather predictions have been happening for decades, well before cloud, well before, sort of that easy access to AI/ML. The meteorologists and the scientists working these predictions were able to do them, but it was very, very cost and resource prohibitive. Now, with the use of more compute and more data storage, we can do this all with machines. Generative AI, on the other hand, is the ability to use AI/ML to generate new things. So whether you're generating new text, you're generating new images, you're generating new music, it's a creative algorithm for AI/ML that actually produces more new things.
Well, let's get a quote from McKinsey to spice things up here. It's always interesting. McKinsey. Yeah, this is an amazing number. I don't know if I believe this number. This is quite a number. McKinsey estimates that generative AI technology could add between $2.6 and $4.4 trillion of economic activity annually across industries. So where does this fit in? How does NASA use it? I mean, this is a big number, Buffy.
Absolutely. Right now we're letting space customers and customers of all industries kind of lead the way to experiment and define where this technology will take them and provide them the most benefit. So it's still early days of generative AI, but we definitely see a bunch of promise, and especially in the space industry. For space in particular, the areas that I see generative AI being the most beneficial are analysis, digital engineering, manufacturing, operations, and then of course that culture access part again. So when you look at analysis, I already talked about weather predictions, but you can use generative AI to use geospatial predictions. So taking pictures of the Earth from space and then predicting where maybe a natural disaster is going to happen, where there's going to be a change in economic activity, all through the use of generative AI on pictures. We'll have better object identification, and we'll even have better image security. Right now, when a company buys an Earth observation picture, that is a picture taken from a satellite and delivered, how do you know that that picture was actually the picture that was taken, or somewhere during the midstream, it didn't change somehow? So generative AI is going to give us that ability to look at images and provide us with image security. When you look at things like manufacturing and digital engineering, that is such a big topic in space right now. A lot of companies are playing with things like digital twins, digital engineering, doing generative AI for different parts and different ways of thinking about parts. And then on top of all that, we have things like Amazon Code Whisperer. So I don't know about you all, the audience that I am speaking to, but in a long time ago, in decades far away, I used to be able to code. If someone asked me to code something today, it would be ridiculous. It would be a mess. But using something like Amazon Code Whisperer, you can say exactly what you want to do, in which language you want to do it, and it builds the functions for you. So it's absolutely game-changing for developers. Going back to the actual areas, operations for space, whether it's mission planning, it's operator training, or disaster recovery from something happening to a spacecraft or a mission. Generative AI is going to help each one of those actually be performed quicker and more accurately. So a great example there is using something like retrieval augmentation generation, where you would take something like all of the manuals for operating a satellite or all the manuals for operating a rocket, and you would put that in your model. You would let your model build all of that information in a secure way where you're holding on to all of that information. And then instead of an operator needing to remember, like, my goodness, that was page 377 where I knew I needed to do this if this red blinky light came on, you'll just ask generative AI, like, generative AI, what do I do with this? And it'll give you an exact answer. So super, super important for efficiency in operations and mission planning.
Buffy, I'm taking so many notes, I'm running out of ink. I mean, so many things. I mean, it's idea. Just take digital twins. Take this idea of a digital twin. I mean, this can be game changing for engineers manufacturing things. And so let's go back to the potential it has here, and maybe think about digital twins. No, so we know that generative AI has lots of potential. We know that. Mm-hmm. But there are space leaders listening to this podcast that don't know where to start with the technology. So what would you tell them? Digital twin, or where do they start?
Yeah, it's hard and it's unique. It's unique to every single business. But I will say that I think generative AI is going to be a part of every single industry and every single business. And so there's huge impetus to get started with generative AI right now. Now with Amazon type services, anyone can be in the process of generative AI. AWS makes it easy, practical, and secure for customers of all sizes to use generative AI in all the layers of the ML stack. So while space has a long heritage in sort of these deep, hard problems like manufacturing, operations, analytics, generative AI can help in all of those. And so I would say the great place to start is the workforce and just get started.
Well, Buffy, I don't want to rain on your parade here or turn this into kind of a downer, but we know there's a lot of opportunities in generative AI, but there's some limitations to the technology too. I mean, some people misapply it. So let's go to the other side of the coin. Sometimes there's bad applications, aren't there?
So for AWS, we're committed to the responsible use of AI/ML across the board, and we want to provide customers with the tools and guidance to use AI/ML responsibly. One of the ways that we're able to do that is working directly with customers. And so AWS works directly with these customers to understand some of the concerns over generative AI and continue to push responsible AI ML for all customers.
Well, Buffy, I'm recording this in Alexandria, Virginia, about 10 miles from the Pentagon. Just drive through the Pentagon there, and I'm always thinking about cybersecurity because they are certainly thinking about cybersecurity all the time. So it is difficult for us to discuss generative AI without covering the risks and cybersecurity threats that it may pose to the space industry. So what is your perspective on the risks and threats of the technology? I mean, bad guys have AI too, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that whether we're talking about generative AI or not, cyber is no longer a if it happens, it is a when it is going to happen. So companies just need to be more flexible and vigilant all up on detecting and mitigating cyber attacks. So one of the things that our customers in particular tell us is that they're overloaded with information. So using AWS services, you can reduce the undifferentiated heavy lifting of storing that information, parsing that information, understanding that information, and instead produce actionable insights that you can take against cyber. So AWS has over 300 security services and features, as well as things like our AWS Security Lake. And again, those dashboards of actionable insights. So companies can start to work on the when cyber happens instead of the if cyber happens.
Okay, Buffy, this is a part of the podcast where I read a quote from a luminary, and you have to tell me who said it. Okay, it's going to be easy for you. So here's the quote. He said, "My heart is in space, but my brain is in the cloud."
That sounds like Tom Soderstrom.
It does. What a great T-shirt that is. That's a great quote, isn't it? I mean, it's perfect with the discussion today.
Tom's great. And we've actually had the opportunity to be on stage together. So I very much enjoy working with Tom.
Yeah, he'd be a wonderful person to work for. Let's go back to generative AI here. So do you see generative AI replacing human efforts for certain tasks and jobs in the space industry in the near future?
I would say that I see generative AI augmenting tasks and efforts in the space industry. So if we reflect back to the ways I think that generative AI is going to help the space industry, for example, like, again, look at the digital engineering or digital twins. Using something like generative AI are going to allow the individuals working in that part of the mission the ability to work faster and innovate faster, to see an actual spacecraft or a rocket in 3D, be able to model when certain activities happen, whether it's bad radiation or at this point with all of the space activity going on in the belts, even something like space collision. When I look at the industry all up, it is growing faster than ever before, even faster than the 1960s, quite frankly. There are over 10,000 commercial space companies now. It's no longer a nation state activity. It's a very, very commercial activity. And I think the human connection to space will certainly continue.
Well, we look at all these 10,000 companies, look at all these new services and all kinds of startups taking advantage of the sensors in space living at. It seems to me that this huge appetite for generative AI applications, well, can the cloud keep up with the demand for this computing power today?
AWS is highly committed to generative AI. For example, we actually just announced 5 new things around generative AI yesterday, which is at 9:28 for the readers or listeners who are not listening to this in relative time, including the general availability of Amazon Bedrock. So that's huge in terms of letting people experiment with generative AI. Amazon has been heavily invested in the development of AI ML and machine learning for about 25 years, actually. We use it all across our portfolio, whether you're looking at our warehouses, our robots, our e-commerce platform, aka Amazon.com, just buying something. Even our Alexa is using AI ML. And Amazon, therefore, and AWS have been very, very invested in making sure this technology goes forward and making sure that we have the best infrastructure for AI ML. So Amazon, for example, has developed specific silicon for AI ML. We have our Trainium chips and our Inferentia chips, which offer the lowest cost for both training models and running models. So take something like the Trainium TRN1 instance. It can deliver up to 50% cost savings Training, however, is only one part of the equation, right? So you train a model and then you need the predictions to come out, which is a huge part of generative AI, right? That's what you want. You want this sort of creative output to come out. So our inferential chips are able to provide customers with about 4x output on predictions with about 40% better price comparison. And an example of this would be Autodesk. So Autodesk is currently using our inferential chips, again, to make those creative, outputs to customers. And they're able to provide over 100,000 natural language processed answers a month to their customers with what they estimate as a 4.9% improvement over the standard chips for AI ML.
Wow. Well, Buffy, I'm glad you brought up Alexa. I was thinking about asking Alexa this question, but I'm going to ask you. So here's the question for you. For those of us who want to learn more about generative AI, can you tell us a bit about the free and low-cost courses that AWS offers?
Oh, absolutely. Like I said before, AI ML is so important to AWS, and we want everyone to get started with it. So right now, you can go on to aboutamazon.com, and you can find that we have 7 courses right now that are completely free that get customers and individuals started with generative AI. In addition, we've also stood up our Generative AI Innovation Center. So this is a center of deep scientists, deep AI ML experts, industry experts, developer experts that companies can use to come with and just brainstorm about how generative AI can innovate their company. So I'm super excited about that. And I'm super excited to see all of the new ideas that companies come up with. Because while I can postulate on all the ways that generative AI is going to change industries and change the space industries, it's going to be so much bigger and so much more inspiring than anything we can ever imagine right now.
Wow, this has been a great interview. I think what you've done, Buffy, is you've given our listeners pretty good insight on the complex and rapidly changing world of artificial intelligence. I'd like to thank our guest, Buffy Wajvoda, AWS Global Leader for Aerospace and Satellite Solutions Architecture. Thanks, Buffy.
Well, thank you for letting me come and talk to you all. I really enjoyed it, and I'm highly passionate about the topic, as you can see.
Thanks for listening to Constellations, the podcast from Kratos. If you like this interview, please subscribe, tell a friend, and give us a review.